Welcome to Armenian Alliance Conversations. I'm Manyak Sakyan. One of the goals of this series is to highlight the amazing work that Armenian organizations are doing in Armenia and Artsakh. Today, we will be discussing the work of the Paros Foundation, which is focused on economic development, job creation, education, cultural projects, and supporting local organizations in Armenia. My guest today is Peter Abajian, the executive director of the Paros Foundation. Mr. Abajian has worked in the Armenian American community for more than 25 years. He received his Bachelor of Science degree in political science from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. He completed graduate courses in business and marketing at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He has worked with the Armenian Assembly in both its Washington, D.C. offices and the Los Angeles offices. In 2006, Mr. Abajian and his family moved to Armenia to launch and lead the Paros Foundation. He currently splits his time between his home in Los Angeles and his home in Yerevan, Armenia. Peter, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Manyak.
Before each interview, I ask all of my Armenian guests if they would be willing to talk about their Armenian heritage, because we need to learn about the Armenian communities that exist all over the world. Very often, the history of a single Armenian family takes place in multiple countries. What country is your family originally from, and which Armenian communities do you relate to?
That's a terrific question, and I love the opportunity to talk about my family. My mom was actually born in the US, and my father was born in Istanbul. So I'm sort of a half Bolsahai. And at the same time, my three out of my four grandparents were from all from the same village in Western Armenia, Gaiseri. So we're Gaisertsis. And kind of funny, one of my first recollections of being asked where I was from happened when I was actually in college, and there was a brilliant carpet person who had a exhibit of carpets he brought to town, and we were helping set those carpets up as part of the Armenian Student Club. And he was asking all of us where we were from, etc. And he said, "Oh, you're Gaisertsi. That means you guys are thieves and you make good basturma."
Yeah, I just love that because every region of Armenia has a stereotype associated with it, and it's really fun to play around with it. I mean, there are so many jokes. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
please tell us how the Paros Foundation got started, who was involved, and what was it like in the beginning.
So we started the foundation in 2006. In 2005, I had made the decision to leave my current job with the Armenian Assembly, and one of our members that I had met through the Armenian Assembly and through the community in San Francisco actually reached out to me a couple of months after I made the announcement that I was leaving and said, "Listen, I'm doing a little bit of work in Armenia now. I'm thinking of launching a foundation, and would you consider partnering with me on it? And we'll launch the foundation." The person that reached out to me is Roger Strauch. He's a German American that has a long history of being involved in Armenia, and he was. If I may take a minute and explain the story, it's kind of interesting. So when Roger was 14 years old, his father was working with the Soviet Union on the synchrotron accelerator project. They were coordinating through the National Academy of Sciences. Roger's dad was building the U.S. accelerator, and Ardem Alakhanyan was building the Soviet accelerator in Yerevan, Armenia, at the Physics Institute. So the American and the Soviet were coordinating back and forth on the scientific exchange, and they became friends. And Roger's father had invited Ardem and his family to the U.S., and vice versa. Ardem invited Carl Strauch, Roger's dad, and his family. So Roger was 14 years old and went to the Soviet Union and happened to go to Armenia, and sort of took an interest and fell in love with the rich culture and the intrigue of the Soviet Union. And when he grew up and sort of by coincidence, married an Armenian, and was raising his family as Armenians. He became involved in the Armenian American community, and ultimately there was an opportunity in the early 90s to revamp that accelerator that's still in Yerevan. So Roger actually led a mission there to lobby for its relaunch, and that's how he reconnected. And that's how the idea of the Paros Foundation started. He connected with a group there called the Paros Chamber Choir, our namesake, and that's a good friend of his father's encouraged him to support this organization, this choir, that's made up primarily of people with disabilities. So he began being involved with the choir, and there made the decision to launch the foundation. And together we started first supporting the choir, and then we branched out to all the other organizations. Early on, it was primarily based on supporting excellent and amazing organizations in Armenia that were true to their mission, and perhaps needed a bit of nonprofit guidance, and obviously financial support. And we developed a model to support these organizations with both physical resources as well as sort of Western nonprofit expertise. And then that branched out into our project-based model, which we're operating until today.
The Paros Foundation currently has 60 very diverse active projects. Our viewers can check out all of these projects at parosfoundation.org, of course. If someone was looking for a project to donate to, I'm sure they would find a project in this group that appeals to their interests. These projects also illustrate the various types of needs that Armenia has. What do you think are the projects in this group that are going to have the most transformative impact and the most wide reaching benefits?
That's a really, really difficult question to answer because our palette of projects really is reflective of both the need in Armenia as well as some of the desires in the diasporan community. We have a small staff on the ground in Armenia, and they're constantly being approached. And throughout our travels, following up on our project sites, we're constantly running across new needs that need to be addressed. So we try to have a solid impact. Many of our projects are infrastructure based, things that the government really can't get to or is lower on their priority list, even though they're chipping away at the overall nut that needs to be broken. They're not able to get to it. So, for instance, in certain communities, the schools are in terrible condition. The kindergartens are in terrible condition. The medical centers are in terrible condition. So we try to address some of those needs because it helps lots of people. On the flip side, there's donors and parts of our community in the U.S. that strictly wants to do humanitarian work. So to facilitate those kinds of projects, because that truly is a need as well. We identify and try to implement those kinds of projects that are very specific, very humanitarian, in nature, and help people that are in difficult situations. It's a very difficult question to answer, which is better, or which is the right way, or which is going to have the greatest impact. If I always sort of discuss this with potential donors. If you have if you're trying to build up a community, but all the people leave because they're starving in that community, or because of terrible infrastructure or something, you could build something and then there's nobody there. And vice versa. You can't just do short-term things with no long-term vision. So we try to maintain a balance between short-term immediate relief, longer-term development, and the ultimate in long-term development is this economic development sort of plan that we're in the midst of. Because if we can, help develop some industry, help develop jobs where people can earn a normal living, care for their families, and work themselves out of poverty, then you've done it. Then you can focus on other needs. Gyumri is an excellent example of that. There's still a couple thousand families living in domiks in Gyumri. These remnants of shipping containers and wagons that were brought to Armenia with earthquake supplies in them back in the late 80s, early 90s. People converted those into temporary shelters that are now 33 years in, and they're in horrible conditions. And we have a long-term project that we have a long-term and a short-term solution to that problem. In the short term, we raise $25,000 per family. We find an apartment on the local market that's available. We buy it. We put it in their name with a gifting agreement that ensures they can't sell it or rent it out, live elsewhere, and then we tear down their domi. So in the short term, we solved that problem for that family. We bought them an apartment, we've moved on. In the long term, though, unfortunately, we don't have the resources to raise, the $20 million or so it would take to solve this problem, or it's actually more than 20 million, to solve this problem for all the families that are in this homeless kind of situation. So what we've done simultaneously while we operate that short-term project is we launched a children's center in Gyumri called Tebi Arach, with the goal of teaching these children. They have to do well in school, work with them, mentor them, address their humanitarian needs, their short-term needs, put boots on them so they can get to school in the wintertime, help them with their homework, push them into career planning so they can, graduate school, either have a solid vocation or a plan for college, get into college, help them with tuition if they need to. So these children will grow up and mature in the long term to be able to understand that the domik situation that they're in isn't really normal, and it's a solution that if they work hard, they can work themselves out of. So it's a short and long term approach to these problems. So I didn't really answer your question, but I sort of hopefully explained the problems that you face when you look at these long-term and short-term humanitarian versus infrastructure versus economic development kind of projects.
First of all, let me say you answered it really well, because it's not about specific types of projects, mentioning specific projects, but really about the types of projects and how you benefit from each one. From the humanitarian side, from the infrastructure side. I just want to say I think that I knew, of course, that the Paros Foundation was working on the tragedy of getting people out of these domiks, and I think we really should mention it, that this is really a national embarrassment. I think it's one of the great tragedies of Armenia to know and cope with the fact that for 33 years there has not been housing solutions for I believe at least 1,500 families as of today. And I mean, it's just a few apartment buildings a year could have solved this problem. No one was saying
Mm-hmm.
like solve the problem within a year. Obviously, looking at it from the context of what was happening at that time, the Soviet Union was crumbling when the earthquake happened and the war and everything else. But a systematic approach would have solved the problem by now. And it really is a national tragedy. The Artsakh War of 2020 caused a massive humanitarian crisis in Artsakh and Armenia. There were 100,000 refugees from Artsakh fleeing the almost daily bombings that Azerbaijan inflicted on the civilian population of Artsakh. COVID 19 was already a humanitarian crisis in Armenia, and the war put that into a situation that was a humanitarian crisis that was far beyond what it was before. And the Paros Foundation responded to the war in multiple ways. Please tell us what you did.
Thank you. During the war, as everyone in our community was engaged in, we were, closely following what was happening and trying to figure out what we could do. And we sort of did two things at that point. Number one, the Armenian government and the Artsakh government asked all of the Armenian diaspora to support its efforts through Armenia Fund. So the All Armenia Fund and Paros, along with most other organizations, jumped in and immediately launched a fund to raise support specifically for Armenia Fund. To donate to Armenia Fund so they could do the government could rely on those funds for their immediate needs. And we did that. We proudly donated a little over $100,000 to Armenia Fund during the war time, early in the start of the war. As the war progressed, we started receiving many notes and phone calls from donors, from people in Armenia, all saying, our soldiers need this, our humanitarian, our refugees need that, and a lot of it were things that made sense to the from sitting here in Los Angeles. Yeah, it made sense that they needed X. So we quickly used our team in Armenia to develop a network to verify these requests. People are saying, people were calling and saying, well, my brother's in Armenia and he said we need, this specific kind of suture. Well, we used our connections at the health ministry and at the defense ministry to verify, yes, they indeed need, X, Y, and Z. And then we worked with our community to gather those pieces of equipment or those supplies, both humanitarian and a lot of medical stuff. And we immediately dispatched that to Armenia via shipping services, where we could, get these mobile field defibrillators, for instance, in the field within a week. We could get, we shipped surgical units, we shipped medical supplies, specific things that doctors on the ground were asking for, and we were able to gather and get into their hands, within days, literally within days, either shipping with people or putting them on airplanes that were leaving on a weekly basis. So we did a lot of that during the war. Immediately after the war, we were working with families that were still evacuating from Artsakh. We helped families move their cattle out of Artsakh. We helped families with short-term rent. We did food and clothing, a lot of that short-term humanitarian stuff. We also did warm coats for both refugee families as well as for soldiers. There was a shortage. The defense ministry had indicated that a lot of the volunteers, a lot of the new soldiers that were coming in to help, didn't have proper gear. So we helped with some of those, the warm winter coats. We did a campaign for that, and that obviously had its place in the effort. Once the war was complete, there was this turmoil with families still leaving, families starting to head back, et cetera, et cetera. And the Paros Foundation discussed and made the decision that in the immediate short term, we had to work to help secure families that were displaced from Artsakh into permanent housing in Armenia. So, the number one priority that I think everybody in our community felt was to have the 100,000 refugees, as many of them return back to Artsakh as possible and as quickly as possible. So we worked along that theme. We supported families going back. And then beyond that, there is right now about 25,000 Armenians that are still from Artsakh that are still in Armenia. And if they don't have a permanent solution for their housing needs met pretty quickly, they're going to lose hope and either leave for Europe or leave for Russia. And Russia will be the closest place they leave to because it's the most easy transition for them. And that would be a shame, as it was when the Syrian-Armenian flood came to Armenia and weren't able to stay, and they left for elsewhere as well. So to try to fight that, we joined a coalition called the Armenian Resettlement Coalition. There are 4 organizations at the time that were working together. Now we're at 3, but it was Teach for Armenia, Focus on Children Now, the Paros Foundation, and Salman NGO. And together we worked to give these families new lives. So we've interviewed over 125 families from Artsakh that were displaced. We've moved together 20 into new homes with new economic support packages, support for the children, furniture for their homes, et cetera, et cetera. So these 20 families, we did a little part, but these 20 families received brand new lives, and that's still ongoing now. We're moving the last 6 or 7, hopefully in the next couple of months as the weather gets warm, and then the third and sort of next piece of this puzzle is work in Artsakh, because there is indeed a humanitarian crisis regarding housing in Artsakh. There's families living in schools, temporary housing, in buildings that one could call a home, but it really is just a shell, waiting for some kind of permanent housing. The Artsakh government, the Armenian government, Armenia Fund, and the Russian government are all working on housing projects in Artsakh. And I'm proud to say that we're joining that movement. We've committed to rebuilding 10 homes in Artsakh this coming year. One in Stepanakert, a couple in Mardakert, and several in the village of Maghavuz. Again, for Artsakh families that are there that need permanent housing. And that's sort of the walkthrough of what the Paros Foundation did during the 2020 Artsakh War and subsequent to that.
It's incredible, really, the amount of work that you have done and other organizations have done as well. And keeping in mind the reality that this was taking place in the middle of a global pandemic where the logistics of shipping and air travel were almost impossible. I mean, you had billion-dollar companies having trouble with logistics, and um, you had Armenian organizations somehow securing cargo planes for humanitarian aid in the middle of all this. The Paros Foundation has been investing in the border areas of Armenia, like Tavush, for many years because we strategically can't have people abandoning the border areas of Armenia. Especially now, this issue has taken on a renewed urgency because obviously Azerbaijan has been very aggressive about trying to take territory from Armenia.
Yes. The work that we do we made the decision pretty early on that it was really important to try and reach the most needy communities. And essentially, the farther away from Yerevan you are, the more needy your community ends up being. The more isolated you are, the least, the less proper health care you receive. The school's typically in worse condition. There's a whole bunch of problems being super far from the capital city. Yerevan actually is doing pretty well. Generally speaking, when you visit Yerevan, it's a wonderful place. There's a vibrant nightlife, vibrant restaurant scene, hospitality's on the boom. When you go to Armenia's second largest city, Gyumri, it's like you've stepped back 50 years. The situation is much worse than it is in Yerevan, and we made the decision to work in Gyumri, which is technically also on the border with. Gyumri is on the border with, very close to Turkey, and then we got up into the Tavush region and started there. We've worked in remote parts of, or we're working in remote parts of Geragunik, and we're also in Sunik now. So all of these communities we feel are very important because if you don't have a vibrant community on the border, then what how secure is that border? If there's a community where nobody's living there, and the Azeris see that from their military posts, what message does that tell them? That this community is not important to Armenia. It's an empty shell, a ghost town of a border community. So we've made the strategic decision, for security purposes, if nothing else, to do as much as we can to build up those various border communities. In Tavush, I'm proud to say we've worked in, I think the last count I did was 13 border communities in the Bert and Noemberian region, and those communities all border along Azerbaijan. Some of them as close as 150 meters from the border. We've also worked in the Georgianic region, in the village of Vahan, in the villages of Vardenis and surrounding communities. All of the when you come to a village and invest in some basic infrastructure, renovating the kindergarten, doing some work on the school or completely renovating the school, investing in the medical center, renovating, creating a normal space, you see some new life coming into those communities. In Nerkin Garmirach, one of the villages outside of Bert, we've done some major work there. We've invested, really one family and his friends, the Atamian family, invested and adopted that village. And starting in 2012, really, we did our first project there, and we've, built up this community to the point where now the birth rate numbers are doubled. It's so exciting to see people feeling more secure because now they know, their kindergarten's in great shape, their school's in excellent condition, their municipality has some future planning because they have some basic infrastructure needs met. They have water infrastructure. They can water they can have water inside their homes. When you build that packet, people feel more secure in their existence. They're not thinking about where can I go, where conditions might be a little better. So that's essentially the reason why we've come to these border communities, and essentially the reason we're going to continue working in them. It's very, very important to build these communities up so people stay, and they not only just stay, but they begin to flourish as families.
I'm so glad you mentioned the changes that you have seen in real time in these communities, because it's just incredible that you have seen these changes in people's lives and families happening within the space of 1 to 2 years because of the projects that you have done.
It's an incremental approach. If you renovate a kindergarten that only has 10 children attending, for instance, you think, well, that's not a great investment. It's a border community. There's 1,000 villagers in this community. There should be 40 or 50 children of kindergarten aged or preschool aged, but there's only 10 coming. So you make the investment, you renovate that kindergarten, and all of a sudden you see there's 30 children attending. Because people want, everybody wants the best for their children. So if you see that this community has a nice kindergarten, and you see the school's in great shape now because it's been renovated, and there's a basic level of healthcare. It might not be terrific, but it's basic. It's taking care of vaccines and some of your basic emergency needs. That's a community where maybe you can build a life in, and your children, when they graduate, aren't going to think about how to escape to Yerevan or how to escape to, Russia. Instead, they'll think about, okay, what can I do in my community? I have a home here. I have land I can work, and build upon it. So that's the goal with these projects, is to create a place where families can have a future within, and not simply abandon and try to leave.
I believe that quality of life is everything. I think that if Armenians have security, that they have the quality of life that meets their basic needs on a daily basis, they will think less about leaving the country. And that's really the bottom line. One of the humanitarian problems that has been happening in Tavush for decades is random shooting and sniper fire at civilians coming from across the border from Azerbaijan, and also the deliberate destruction of Armenian property. So, for example, to combat this, one of the things that Paros Foundation has done is to build a security wall around the kindergarten to protect children from shooting coming from across the border.
Yeah, it was quite ridiculous that we visited the kindergarten back probably in 2011 or 2012, and a child ran up to us and said, "Look what I found! Look what I found!" And they had a bullet shell that they had found on the kindergarten grounds. The teachers at the kindergarten wouldn't allow the children to go outside and play because they were afraid that being in plain view of borders, the Azeris could shoot at the children. And that village was hit many times by Azeri shelling throughout the years. In the 90s, it was one of the most destroyed villages during the war, and then subsequent to that on Armenian soil. And I think the security wall that we built was the first one that was actually built on Armenian soil. And again, it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything special. It was simply a wall that was designed to, stop sniper shots from penetrating and stopping the Azeris from targeting children and targeting, villagers on the school grounds. With that, there's those border communities throughout that area, in Tavush, in Noemberian, in Bert, in those regions, run that risk. When some of the villagers know that Fridays from 9 to noon is target practice, and they know to not be in their fields. But that kind of really terror affects the villagers in a way that, both sort of short and long term. They're afraid to work their fields certain times of the day, months, because they know the Azeris are more apt to shoot at those times. They don't, children, certain times, they don't want the children to be out. There's extra stress in these families, high blood pressure, hypertension, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things spill out from this kind of man-made terror on behalf of the Azeris. What's happened subsequent to the war, that situation's improved a bit. There are less, accounts of shootings. There's less accounts of Azeris setting, fields on fire on purpose around harvest time. So I'm a bit hopeful that things might be improving, but everyone's still cautious, and you have to be careful because, when you're on the border, that means you're under the, watchful eye of Azeri snipers.
Some people in the international community may have been shocked that Azerbaijan was targeting civilians during the Artsakh War of 2020, but Armenians know, particularly Armenians living in Artsakh and people living in the border villages, that this is not a new thing that has been happening, and it didn't just happen during the war. It's been happening for decades, and there's no denying it. We have the evidence, we have the people, we have the eyewitnesses, and this is something that really has been happening since the first Artsakh War in the 1990s. It's just horrific.
It really is. It really is. It's unacceptable, and it's really sad that the international human rights organizations, essentially could care less.
For years, I have been speaking to Armenians who unfortunately doubt that donations to Armenian organizations are used to really help people without waste and fraud in the process. These concerns seem to have increased after the Artsakh War. I know people who say that they would gladly donate more money if they had more confidence. We want to inspire confidence in people to keep supporting to keep supporting Armenia and Artsakh at this crucial time and in the decades to come. How does the Paros Foundation address this concern? And what would you personally say to someone who has concerns about donating to Armenian organizations?
This is an excellent question, and one that we get on a pretty regular basis. I donated $5. I want to know that my $5 actually went to its intended purposes. So, our founder and I had a long discussion about this early on, when we launched our project-based model. And to actually his credit, he made the decision to underwrite all of our administrative expenses so that every penny that comes into the Paros Foundation goes exactly to its intended purpose. If you meant for your $5 to go to this Artsakh fund to help a family get a new home, or if you intended it to go to Gyumri to the Children's Center, that's exactly where it goes. And we encourage all of our donors and help facilitate this whenever possible to go and see the work that was completed, see the quality, see that their name's on a plaque, see that, they can follow their money, they can follow their donation and see that it truly got to its intended place. We try to be as public as possible, and respond to the public whenever they ask about budgets. We try to be as efficient as possible with the spending of our funding, because resources are limited, and I'm always very happy when I see the results of the construction projects we've done, and I see the budgets for the children's centers we support. They're all very, very efficient, but it's not enough that we do our own oversight and our internal audits, et cetera, et cetera. It's important for the donors to go there. So if I was talking to a potential donor or to someone in the community, I'd say, if you give 50 or $100 to something, you should go and see it. When you're in Armenia, you should go and absolutely see where your money went, because it's important to follow follow that. Follow up is key. Our team in Armenia and I visit projects on a regular basis, whether they're active projects or projects we implemented years ago, to make sure that, number one, the quality of the work was there, that things are being followed up with, and if there's a problem, if it was a problem that was our fault, we fix it, and if it was a problem that the community's done something wrong, we stay on them until it's done right. It's not a place to, Armenia is not a place to throw money at. It's a place to build together. So you have to be engaged. You have to have a team on the ground. You have to go and see it with your own eyes, and that will ensure that that old tendency of graph is goes away.
I think donating money to a nonprofit organization is just like doing your research before you hire someone to do work for you or before you invest in a company. People should look at the track record of the organization with their past projects. And of course, in the United States, nonprofit organizations are required to release their accounting statements on an annual basis, and you can usually find that on their website. I think that it also matters if you donate to an organization that really uses the money wisely to make the best possible impact with the money that you're donating.
Absolutely. Super important to follow through and do your research.
After the Artsakh War and the continuing threats that Armenia and Artsakh face from Azerbaijan, there have been a lot of conversations about what Armenia and the diaspora failed to do in the last 30 years. And I just want to say a few words about this. I think that the first issue is that people are not really aware of the work that Armenian organizations do. Because for reasons that I don't understand, Armenian media rarely covers the projects being done by various organizations. I also think the larger issue is that for the past 30 years, organizations have been doing a lot of the work that should be done by the national and local governments in Armenia. Organizations are having trouble devoting resources to innovation, improvements in education, transformative economic development, business incubators, and so on, because organizations are doing the fundamental work of laying down water pipes, building highways, renovating Soviet era buildings, and other basic necessity projects. For example, among the list of active projects that the Paros Foundation is currently doing, these are some of the infrastructure projects that you have: the renovation and expansion of a kindergarten building in Aigezor village, which the community requested; replacing a 200-meter section of a water pipe in Verin Sakavan village in Tavush; providing new windows for the kindergarten building in Yeghvar village in Sunik; extensive renovations of the kindergarten building in Norgeri village in Kotayk. The last infrastructure project I'm going to mention is the project to bring gas heating to a school in Khoratan village in Tavush. A new gas heating system was installed at the school that was previously burning wood for heat. There was no gas pipe going to the school, so the governor's office requested that the Paros Foundation help fund the installation of a new gas pipe for the new heating system. Of course, infrastructure projects help the economy, facilitate education, and improve quality of life. I believe that the government should focus on infrastructure building and maintenance, leaving nonprofit organizations to do the projects that the government can't do really well. I'm going to mention some of the projects that the Paros Foundation is currently doing that really apply the innovative vision and strengths of nonprofit organizations. For example, we have the Assyrian Vocational Training Program in Gyumri, which provides young adults with vocational courses and hands on training in partnership with local companies. The Paros Foundation has implemented a recycling program in 10 border villages in Tabush that is focused on teaching children the benefits of recycling. There's a partnership with Musical Armenia to provide 18 children in Vanadzor with scholarships to attend a music school. Finally, the Argepar Business Incubator project can potentially transform the economy of a village that is in dire need of economic opportunities. The Paros Foundation is renovating a closed factory building to provide a space for local people to launch small businesses with guidance and support. The Paros Foundation is also going to help these businesses access markets in Armenia and export markets as well.
You did a terrific job summarizing the challenges that the diaspora community of NGOs or the international group of NGOs has, and the roles that the Armenian government has, and what's happening. You really hit it just right. It's, if Armenia had all of the infrastructure needs taken care of, then I think the diasporan organizations and NGOs would be left to, working on investing in Armenian culture, working on, doing high end, things like the Tumo Center, and there are some visionary programs happening in Armenia. There absolutely are. Tumo's an excellent example now. They're, replicating their model throughout the country. They're teaching, they're opening the children's eyes to other things that are available that their schools probably don't have. But if you have if you only have a Tumo Center, and I'm just using Tumo as an example, if you only have a Tumo Center in a village, but the school's roof is leaking, that's not going to solve our problems either. It has to be a balance again of short-term fixes and long-term solutions. So the innovative stuff is the long-term solution. We're slowly changing people's mentality. We're slowly helping develop economic stability in these communities, and in the short term, we're solving some of their infrastructure problem. I'm not pro or anti any government that's in power in Armenia. We've worked with, the old guys, we've worked with the new guys at all levels, at the village level, at the municipality level, at the, Hamaik level, at the, and at the national level. Each government since the beginning has had a plan for renovating X amount of schools, for renovating X amount of medical centers, for pulling X amount of pipelines. The problem has been over the years the inefficiency of the system by which they implement these projects. And that inefficiency is a combination of government bureaucracy, theft and bribing and all that corruption stuff, as well as sort of the nature of the times, the supply chain of materials that were available, et cetera, et cetera. The government has a list of X amount of schools that they're renovating this year. We work with them to understand what they're doing so we can decide what we're going to do. In a perfect world, as you said, the government would be able to take care of all these infrastructure problems and leave the NGOs to developing Armenia's rich culture and working on innovative and cutting edge investments in the community. The one thing that I can say post war is that we the Paros Foundation are specifically looking at these opportunities even deeper than we were pre-war to develop economic opportunities for locals. Armenia cannot move ahead without a strong military, for instance. Armenia cannot move ahead without a strong high-tech industry. So the high-tech folks need to be investing in the high-tech industry. The military folks that are involved in military, outside of Armenia need to be involved in military planning and development and companies in Armenia. We are doing quite a bit of work in villages, so we're looking at trying to put people to work, create opportunities to solve a problem and put people to work. Armenia, as a small example, and this drives me crazy. The fact that Armenia is not food secure. We have to continue to import food from outside of the country because we don't have enough food to feed ourselves. What can we do to help improve that? Well, we can help plant more food. We can help, talk about, implement. We're in the process of implementing an aquaponics project where we'll be able to grow food in a very sustainable way, with very little water, with solar power, et cetera, et cetera. That's a model, quite frankly, that might end up being implemented in 50 villages in Armenia, and help chip away at that problem of food insecurity. We don't have enough. We're not growing enough food. In these communities all along the border, and in Gyumri, one of their biggest crops is wheat. But with wheat, if you don't have the ability to water those fields, all you do is you plant the seeds and you do a rain dance and hope that the crops will get enough rain to produce a decent harvest of wheat that year. It's a very sustenance farming kind of situation. But with an aquaponics system, you're not going to necessarily grow wheat in an aquaponics situation, but you can grow lots of other crops that will both be seedlings to plant in the grounds, or to grow crops that you can export at high value, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots of innovative things that NGOs can do within their means, but it's just, unfortunately, it's impossible to ignore the immediate needs that the government has. And like I said, the old government and the new governments are all working on these problems. They're just taking an awful lot longer than they should have.
I'm glad you mentioned the food security issue because it is really stunning to me that Armenia does not have enough food to sustain itself without relying on imports, because we have all, Armenia is a small country, but we have all this amazing land that is literally just empty. For those who have traveled in Armenia outside of Yerevan, people are just amazed at the vast stretches of land that are just sitting empty and uncultivated. And they all say the same thing: if only people would cultivate these lands, or develop something like what we have here in the United States. And I know it's not the best model, it's industrial agriculture, obviously, but that's what we have in the United States with the large scale, like, chicken hatcheries and things like that, where in Armenia we're importing chicken that is actually less expensive than the chicken that is being produced in Armenia.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
What is the biggest challenge that the Paros Foundation has in the work that you do?
It's a positive challenge. It's not a huge problem, but it's the model that we operate by. So I'll just explain that really quickly. Um, you know, the there's two people here in Los Angeles that work to raise funds, and we oversee the projects that are being implemented in Armenia remotely from here. We have a team of 5 staffers in Armenia. So the 7 of us essentially is the Paros Foundation, and we work, and we do a pretty darn good job making sure our projects are implemented to the way that a donor here would expect. So the challenge is that our projects have to be, implemented with a solid budget, with a high quality, low budget, high quality materials, high quality craftsmanship work, so that we can in turn report back to our donors that this was done successfully at a reasonable budget, with its intended purpose, so that they're willing to reinvest in the next project. So it's this cycle. I might be the best salesperson in the world and can raise, millions of dollars a year. But if the projects are lousy and they're not done well, word's going to get back to the donors, and then the cycle is going to break. So our biggest challenge is honestly balancing that wheel, keeping that wheel rolling forward. So, reporting to the donors, raising money from the donors, identifying the project, finding the sponsor, raising the money, starting the project, reporting back to the donors so that they see that it was done well, so that they can tell their friends, and then that next cycle starts, the next project and the next project. And that's how we've developed the organization. We started out with a budget that was all administrative. So our founder was covering the entire budget, and now he and his family put in a chunk of money to underwrite our administrative costs, and we raise and implement about $1.5 million worth of projects a year now in Armenia, and that's within a period of the last 15 years. We ratcheted it up, and the war. Obviously, there were a lot of donations that came in specifically during the war. That was a huge boost for, I think, all Armenian organizations. There were people active, but beyond that, our base is about $1.5 million worth of projects a year in Armenia, and we've been able to maintain that level for the last 3 or 4 years now.
I'm glad you mentioned the amount of money that you devote to projects every year, because it's really stunning. You know, People think, okay, $1.5 million is obviously a lot of money, but it's really not a lot of money when you're embarking on infrastructure type projects where you're renovating buildings. Anyone who has built anything, you're just shocked at how expensive everything is. So it's just incredible the amount of work that you have done with a very limited amount of money. And one of the issues that we were talking about earlier is, why doesn't the government do these things? I mean, it's hard to really justify that the government didn't have an extra $1.5 million a year, to have done some of the things that you have done that are similar as far as just the infrastructure projects. I'm not talking about the
Mm-hmm.
other obviously innovative projects that you have devoted to completing. So in 2011, you announced the 100 for 100 Projects for Prosperity initiative, a bold and ambitious plan to complete 100 projects by 2015 to honor the memory of the Armenian Genocide.
Yeah, that was something we came up with as a bit of a slogan, but also set forth our project-based model of philanthropy. The contention we made was that, people and organizations all around the world wanted to figure out how to properly commemorate the centennial of the Armenian Genocide. And, there were a whole bunch of plans we were hearing. People were going to place ads in the paper and, all this stuff. And we thought we'd take a positive spin on this. We started in 2011 because we knew if we announced publicly and loudly early on, we'd help the community itself think about what they indeed wanted to do. We were among the first to announce a concrete set of plans for how we were going to commemorate the centennial of the genocide, and I think that started the floodgate of activities that took place prior to 2015. And in addition, we thought we could have a solid impact. We could create a positive atmosphere for families, organizations, individuals that wanted to do something to mark the centennial, but do it in a positive manner. So we began identifying projects. We accepted projects from the public, both from the diaspora as well as from Armenia itself, things that needed to be done. And that proved to be very, very successful. Our 100th project, we actually symbolically opened on April 24th, 2015, as the Tebi Arach Children's Center in Gyumri. And this is that center I referred to earlier where we were talking about helping these children work themselves out of poverty. That's the center that we opened in 2015, and it's still booming right now. There's 180 children that attend that center. And we, through that model and through that experience of identifying a budget, the project started at $250 and went all the way up to $100,000. So there was a variety of projects in that 100 projects we implemented. But what we learned in that is something very valuable. People in the diaspora like specific things to support. If I call a donor, if I talk to your viewers and I say, listen, we need $1,000 or $2,500 to do X, and it's specific, and you can go visit it, you can see it. We'll send you pictures of it. When it's done, the children will send you a note, et cetera, et cetera. They're willing to support. They're looking for ways to engage, and that very specific project-based model, knowing that the administrative costs are underwritten by somebody else, has become successful. So after the completion of the 100 projects, we continued in that very same manner, and now I think we're over 300 completed projects or something like that.
Many of the 100 projects and the projects that you have done since then are collaborative efforts with local organizations. What are the advantages and challenges in working with local organizations on projects?
Another excellent question. So, local organization, it's important for the diaspora to listen and understand what an Armenian in Armenia or organization based in Armenia is saying, because sometimes the needs are unique, and other times they're very similar to what an NGO would face here in the U.S. So it's a learning experience partnering with a local organization, explaining what our set of needs would be if we engage in this project, understanding what their needs would be, and then working together to solve those needs. It's really, really excellent when you can work with a local organization and the individuals running that organization as colleagues, and building up their capability through the implementation of a project that solves both sets of needs. It's really excellent. It is challenging. There's a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of you can oftentimes be they can try to take advantage, et cetera, et cetera. But if you, the organization, or if you, the individual, do your homework and understand, what the prevailing wage is for the work, what the acceptable number of staffers are for a particular project, et cetera, you can come up with a win-win situation. And at the end of the day, you have a lifelong friend. You've made the Armenian world smaller by bringing everybody together, and you'll have a solid working relationship moving into the future with these, with this village, with this community, with this project, with the children, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's absolutely incredible. And one of the things that I want to mention is you can also have a bit of a culture clash while you're working. If you're a diasporan Armenian working with people in Armenia, you think like we're all Armenians and we're all the same culture. 99% of it is the same culture. But that little 1%, because of the communities worldwide that have developed their own distinct, social mores and cultures and different, just you can actually experience that, and it just amazes you. But you get over it and you learn something new.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so amazing when we approach these new communities, because the first tendency is for them to want to host us. So come, sit down, we have to break bread, et cetera, et cetera. Well, our team has 15 projects to view that day. So, we can't break bread with every one of the projects. So we kind of space it out. And it's a cultural thing. So, we go, okay, last time we went here to this community, he offered us, to sit down and have dinner. We passed, once, twice, three times. This time it's his turn. Now we have to sit down with him, and it's a cultural thing. You have to do it, within reason, and you do it, as you need to. But it's always wonderful to see the the passion at which these communities invest in these projects. Though that's when you know you're doing the right project. When the community's happy, when your team is happy, when the children are happy, the teachers are happy. It's a wonderful culmination of a project when things have come together in a way where everybody celebrates. And English, Armenian, Russian doesn't matter. It all comes together, and everyone ends up speaking that same language of happiness and success.
I want to end our interview on a note that hopefully will inspire people to take action. Can you describe the Paros Foundation Service Armenia program? And please explain what kind of time and financial commitment are required for participants.
This is an excellent final question. In 2013, my children actually wanted an experience where they go to, Armenia with a group of like-minded students and experience, Armenia. And because it was my daughters, I refused to allow them to just, go out and party and have fun. We had to make it something meaningful. And, back in 2013, it was very difficult for a young person, a young student, to go and engage in meaningful work or have an internship. I mean, it was possible, but more times than not, it was a different set of work ethics, and it was very difficult for a student to leave with a meaningful experience. So instead of trying to set up internships for the students, we decided to create a program based on service, getting needed service work done, touring them around the country, letting them have fun, and falling in love with Armenia was the goal. So we launched something called Service Armenia. We operate it every summer. This year it's going to be from July 3 to July 24. It's open to students ages 17 to 23. And then we have a program in the fall that we started last fall, for young professionals ages 25 or 24 to 45. So it's sort of two phases. The college age students, essentially high school and college age students, come in the summers, and then young professionals have a program in the fall. The summer program is really, really fabulous. We've had about 120 students go through that program over the years. They become lifelong friends with one another. They have a newfound passion for Armenia because they put a little sweat equity into it. They do a combination of working with children and children's centers. They work on construction projects while they're there. We do some orphan excursions where we take children from the orphanages in Armenia and take them out on half-day excursions. And they see a part of Armenia that most tourists don't see. I'm very proud to say that about 35% of the students that come and participate on Service Armenia are back in Armenia within the next year or two. They plan on, okay, next summer, this is what I'm going to do. We have students that repeat with us. We have students that come back and participate on other programs. And it's really, really excellent. It's the future is connecting these children and young people to Armenia in a meaningful way, where they know this is their place as well, and they see opportunities to engage. The young professional trip, which happens in the fall, is the next level. It's, I'm a young finance person, or I'm a young high-tech person, and we try to connect them with like-minded people in Armenia as well, so they understand how in the future they can work together. They can, how they can learn from one another, and they can grow together. So, it's the same program, but for professionals, and they're absolutely a blast, and they're really, really successful. So, the financial part of it is, we ask all the participants to make a financial contribution, a donation, that we use to implement the service work that they're going to work on. And that's usually a $300 or $400 contribution, depending on which program. I think this year we're doing $400 contributions for the summer program. And then in addition, the lodging, some of the food, the work days, the transportation, the touring, all of that, the fee is about $1,800, and that includes the donation. So about $1,800 plus your airline ticket. We'll get a young person there for the summer. And some of the young people actually work in advance to raise part of the money, which is even better because it makes them even more committed to service. And that's one of the goals, obviously. So we've had students do bake sales. We've had students do fundraisers, reach out to their family and friends for support, collect recyclables, all kinds of different things to raise a few bucks before they get there, to help underwrite their fees. We expect that, well, we're hopeful that COVID will be under control this summer, and our July 3rd launch date will be a success this year.
Just in my personal life and speaking to young people, and also the number of organizations that are facilitating programs where young people and young professionals get to Armenia, I find that once they get to Armenia, it's like a lifelong connection. A relationship is born with Armenia that lasts a lifetime. And of course, it's not everybody. There are people, but I find again 99% of young people. So the key is to have that program that facilitates these kinds of trips and excursions to give people the opportunity to go to Armenia in a structured way where they're actually doing meaningful work in Armenia while they're there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so nice to see that there's so many programs offering that opportunity. Um, the church has programs, the youth groups have programs, the scout groups have programs. Our niche was service, and our theme is sort of work, tour, and play. We want these groups to connect with one another, these students to connect with one another, and it's so interesting because you'll get a student. We've had students that are one quarter Armenian that knew their grandpa and their mom's side was Armenian or whatever, and no other connection to the community. And then we've had students that are, born and raised in Glendale, go to Armenian school, and their entire, and they don't have any non-Armenian friends. And you throw those two groups, you still throw those two students together, and then you start discussing Armenian genocide, development, war, and they find it really broadens their horizons on these issues, and it's really spectacular to see that discussion take place. That's one of the things that I really enjoy over the summer is helping facilitate these discussion nights. We do that as part of the program where we throw a topic out and do some general leading them down the path, and then we let them take over. And that kid that's diehard Armenian raised, Armenian every day, sees a different perspective, and that kid that's kind of disconnected with the community sees a perspective, and it forms, like William Soroyan said, it forms a new Armenia, and it's really terrific, really, really terrific.
Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a privilege to get your insights on what it takes to lead a very successful nonprofit organization. You have an incredible track record of completing projects of all types, and at the same time, you're always thinking creatively about how to overcome obstacles to accomplish your goals. I urge everyone to visit parosfoundation.org, where you can take a look at the active projects that still need donations and past projects as well.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciated this opportunity. And you and the Armenian Alliance are doing amazing work to help spread the word. Thank you so very much.
My guest today is Peter Abajian, Executive Director of the Paros Foundation, joining us from Los Angeles, California.